Hey everyone, welcome back to As I See It. I know it's been a while, but I felt like I have to pick it up now and do a video about this because many of you have been asking, because a lot of you know that my undergraduate degree is in political economy of industrial societies. It's exactly what it sounds like: politics, economics, history. And my area of focus was Russia and specifically the Cold War. So this is an area that definitely is of interest to me. It's something I've studied. It's something that I continue to pay attention to. And so I thought I would just go ahead and talk about it today. In this first video, let's just talk about why Putin invaded Ukraine. And in future videos, I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of Ukraine and also what it means for the rest of the world. So why did Putin invade Ukraine? So you have to go back a little bit in the history and understand the relationship between Russia and Ukraine. And again, I'm going to save the bigger history for another video. But in 1991, the president of the Soviet Union broke up the Soviet Union and said, okay, all of the different parts of the Soviet Union are now independent, giving Ukraine its independence. Of course, a lot of the old hardcore Soviet nationalists really weren't happy with that. The Soviet Union was a superpower. Is Russia going to be a superpower without all of that imperialistic, all that land and all those other countries being under the umbrella of the Soviet Union? Specifically, old school KGB and hardcore like Leninists and Stalinists probably weren't very happy with the USSR being broken up. Putin is from that group of people. Putin was KGB. So in addition to Putin being kind of old school, wanting the supreme power of the Soviet Union and being a huge force in Eastern Europe and a superpower, there's also the matter of ego and making a place for himself in history. Russia as a country was actually starting to go down the path of democracy. It was really, really messy in the beginning. There was a lot of corruption. Even after the Soviet Union fell, people had to stand in long lines just to get bread and food. So it was a mess. The transition from any form of socio-economic system to another one is always going to be messy. And a mess like that, when the country is divided, some people are like, yeah, I want the old Soviet Union back. And some people are like, no, democracy. And the pro-Soviet people are like, yeah, but things were better back then. And there was a really big divide in the country. And when there's a big, huge divide in the country, when people are suffering, that is the perfect environment for a dictator to come into power. And that's exactly what happened. In 2012, Putin was elected democratically in a fair and free democratic election. But over the years, Putin started slowly taking away people's rights. And that's what happens when people are desperate and they have this all-powerful person saying, I'm going to fix everything for you. I'm going to make everything better. The country sucked and you're suffering and I feel your pain and I'm going to make things better. And they do start seeing things get better. It gives that dictator so much more power. And that's what's happened. Since 2012, while people might be seeing slight advances in their lives, what they're not seeing, maybe because of the propaganda, because he is now controlling the media, controlling the messages that they hear, think 1984, that he is slowly stripping away all their rights and their freedom even of thought and fact. So that is where Russia is now. There have not been fair elections in Russia. He keeps getting reelected, but his opponents who run against him mysteriously get poisoned, or they end up in prison, or, people who speak out against him end up disappearing. That is not a democracy. That is a dictator, and that is what Putin has become. And the people let him. Why do the people let a dictator come to power? Because they're struggling, because they're suffering. And when you start restricting information, when you start putting alternate facts into the collective consciousness, you don't know what's up and what's down and what's left and what's right. You may not remember that. All you might remember, because that's all he's feeding you, is before I came along, things were really bad. And he might be telling you things are better now, but maybe they really aren't. So this is the environment in which Putin has been thriving. He and his minions, the other oligarchs, are getting super rich off the Russian people while they're barely getting by. So now Putin has all this power, right? And his ego is taking off. He's getting older. We don't know what his mental condition is. And he's old school KGB. He wants to be a world power again. He wants a place in history that says that puts him in the history books as the person who reunited the USSR, who saved the Soviet Republic. And I've been saying for years that's what his agenda is. He has been creating chaos in the rest of the world. He wants to see NATO break up because he has an imperialistic, ego-driven personality. He wants to go out and take over as much land. He'd probably go into Eastern Europe and into Europe if he could. He wants to be a superpower. He wants to recreate the Soviet Union. And Ukraine, having been a part of the former Soviet Union and the country that's stopping him from invading the rest of Europe, has been in the way. This is a slow move west. This is a way for him to gain power, to get right up against the border of Europe, by getting closer to Poland and some of the other countries that are butting up against the Ukraine. Furthermore, Rachel Maddow made an excellent point. My take on this has always been he's old school KGB. He wants the Soviet Union back. He wants to be a superpower again. And the Russia economy is a mess. They have oil and gas, and their economy is one of the smallest economies in the industrialized world. Despite having a huge population, despite having all these resources, they've got a tiny, tiny little economy because he and his minions are just sucking it all the money out and keeping it for themselves. You've been hearing that about the sanctions all over the world, about people freezing the assets of the oligarchs. The oligarchs are taking all the wealth out of the country, buying yachts, putting them in bank accounts all over the world, hoarding that wealth for themselves, and keeping the Russian people poor, keeping the economy very poor. So the problem for Putin with this is, and Rachel Maddow pointed this out, Ukraine is on their border. The Ukraine used to be part of the USSR. The Ukraine declared their independence and said, you know what, we want to be a democracy. And they, over the last several years, have been making a lot of great strides toward a democracy. You know, getting rid of some of the corruption, electing free and fair elections. Zelensky has been really good for the country. He's not corrupt. He's a man of the people. And the problem this creates for Putin is that because of the historical ties between Ukraine and Russia, they share people, right? The people in the Ukraine and the people of Russia are friends, they're relatives. There are 30% of the Ukrainian population speaks Russian. There are Russian Ukrainians, Ukrainian Russians. There is a lot of history between those two people. So if Putin's got Russians who he is trying to tell, oh, we're better than the rest of the world, democracy sucks, democracy's bad, you don't want democracy, you're better off being in Russia under my regime than you are being part of the West because the West is awful and they kill people and, you know, their economies are a mess and you'll suffer under democracy. If you have a successful democracy, not only right on your border, but the people who are living that successful democracy speaking on a regular basis to your people, that creates a problem. The Russian people are speaking to their relatives in the Ukraine who are thriving. They've got jobs, they've got plenty of food, and they've got things, you know, all the clothes they want, and the freedom of speech and the freedom of media, and they have a lot of the things that the Russians don't have. And so Putin is terrified that he's going to lose his grip on his people if he allows this democracy on his border to thrive. So in addition to needing to expand the Russian influence and to be a superpower and to recreate the Soviet Union so that his place in the history books is set as a hero. He cannot afford to have a successful democracy on his border talking to his people truth, right? Speaking truth to his people about what's really going on. So he has been working over the years to create this false narrative saying that there's all this corruption in the Ukraine and that they're executing Russians, and he has created all these lies to try to justify to his people invading the Ukraine. It's all lies. And when you control the media, when you kill journalists who speak the truth, there was one media outlet in Russia that was somewhat free. They spoke out against the war and he shut it down. We're going to talk in a minute in another video about what this means to us as Americans. And I hope that just in what I'm talking about here, without me having to spell it out, you're seeing some connections to where we almost ended up. So that's why Putin invaded the Ukraine. He can't afford to have a successful democracy on his border, and he wants to recreate the Soviet Union as a world power. He wants dominance. That's what he's about. He's a narcissistic, probably sociopathic. It's all about ego. It's all about ego for him. That's all this is about. And he's willing to lie, cheat, steal, commit war crimes in order to achieve his narcissistic, sociopathic goals. So that's it. That's why he invaded Ukraine. Stay tuned for more background on the Ukraine-Russian relationship and what it means for us. Thanks for listening.